and really trying to start a bidding war, so to speak, over that asset. And, I say bidding war. What's one thing I've learned in being here for 9 years, and something that I try to tell our analysts and associates, is the highest price, the highest always win in this. I think coming out of school or something, you assume people are going to take the highest price. But this is such an emotional journey. This is their livelihoods. This is their families that are involved in these companies. These are employees that have been there for decades. So what we really try to create is, yes, we want to bid and have bids come across your asset. But we really want to look at what a cultural fit would look like, and a structural fit to continue your legacy, or take the business to the next level in whatever way you deem possible. Some of our clients are going to stay working in the company, so it really matters who they're partnering with. And that's part of our process that we're really trying to maximize. We say a deal rests on a three-legged stool, and that's price, structure, and cultural fit. And without one of those, obviously the stool falls over.
Today, we have the privilege of being with Shane Jansen, Vice President of Alexander Hutton. Shane manages analysts and associates and works with M&A and transactions for doing the due diligence for your business. And welcome, Shane. Why don't you just tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Thanks, Graham. Thanks for having me on. After graduating from University of Washington, I joined Alexander Hutton almost 9 years ago.
Nice big city to be part of doing M&A.
It is. It's very exciting. I think after a pretty quiet M&A market in 2023, things are really starting to roar back here. Obviously, interest rates have a play in that. But from our firm, we focus on family and founder-owned businesses and guiding them through transactions. So, and that's predominantly in the Pacific Northwest. So even though we're headquartered here in Seattle, we're in Idaho, Montana, Oregon, up into Alaska and other states quite a bit.
And when you say founder and family-owned, is it 20 years? Is it multi-generation? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's typically size is probably the main parameter. For us, we really try to create a competitive process around a business for a transaction. So, we want to get to a level where institutional investors start to become those bidders. And that usually is above 15 million of enterprise value or total value of the business. That usually means earnings somewhere for non-software companies, earnings above 2 million a year.
So earnings above 2 million a year and enterprise value. Why don't you explain what that means a little bit more for some of these listeners?
Sure. Yeah. So, predominantly when a company is being valued, it's being valued on EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's really just a fancy way of people who studied finance to come up with what the cash flow is in the business. And eventually from Graham, from your previous life, what they can get lending against. And so as you think about that and you think about what are maybe some other things that you're running through your company, we see that all the time, especially with founder family-owned businesses that, you may have a family member on the payroll that's not working. You may, take some of the luxuries that it is to own your own business and run it through the company. So we really want to get to what the true cash flow is of the business as if someone else owned it. So, typically above 2 million, approaching 2.5 to 3 is where you start to see private equity and larger strategics really start to get interested, and you can really start to create a competitive process around the asset, which is really what our firm specializes in.
And so when you say institutional, it's not just private equity. You have other options.
Yeah, it's what I mean by institutional is just not an individual, someone who's just looking to buy a company to run. You're dealing with more backed people with funds, people with access to the capital at that level.
And so if you have, I don't know, if you're making a baseball bat, just like Babe Ruth has behind you, what did his jersey just sell for? 25 million or something?
Something like that. Yeah. I'm a bit of a baseball fan, not a Yankees fan though. So I'll just preface that.
Uh, but so if you're making baseball, I'm just using it as an analogy, making baseball bats, and somebody comes along and they're making baseballs, you would try and marry the two organizations in the same family.
Yeah, exactly. You would go to probably the 10 baseball bat manufacturers in the country and really try to start a bidding war, so to speak, over that asset. And I say bidding war. What's one thing I've learned in being here for 9 years, and something that I try to tell our analysts and associates, is the highest price doesn't always win in this. I think coming out of school or something, you assume people are going to take the highest price. But this is such an emotional journey. This is their livelihoods. This is their families that are involved in these companies. These are employees that have been there for decades. So what we really try to create is, yes, we want to bid and have bids come across your asset. But we really want to look at what a cultural fit would look like, and a structural fit to continue your legacy, or take the business to the next level in whatever way you deem possible. Some of our clients are going to stay working in the company, so it really matters who they're partnering with. And that's part of our process that we're really trying to maximize. We say a deal rests on a three-legged stool, and that's price, structure, and cultural fit. And without one of those, obviously the stool falls over.
Right. Well, and right now I'm working on a transaction, and it's the culture piece. He's turned down two offers that are exactly what he's asking for dollar-wise.
Yep.
And he just doesn't like the people.
Yep.
It's like, wow, okay, well,
yeah.
We
see that all the time, and people taking the second or third highest, because an extra couple million at the end of the day may not move the needle as much as for the most part. Our clients are still going to go to the same grocery store and still see their employees. They're not going to up and leave the community that they've built their company in. And they want to be able to do that with integrity.
Right. No, that's very good. And that kind of leads into the purpose piece, and what's next for some of these owners. What does it look like? And have you seen any challenges that they have, or what you're helping guide them through for that?
Yeah. I think a lot of times when people think about doing a transaction to sell their company, they think they have to sell 100%. That's just kind of ingrained in a lot of people's minds. And there's a lot of flexibility for a structure on an M&A transaction. You can sell a majority stake, you can sell a minority stake, you can sell up to 70, 80% and retain that 15, 20, 30% and get another bite at the apple down the road. So, that's called a recapitalization. We see quite a bit of those, where you have clients that are, maybe in their 50s or 60s, know they don't want to be done yet. Know they have a good 3 to 5 year run, and want to set the company up for success. So they'll take some chips off the table, indemnify their family, we like to say, and then kind of ride on the balance sheet of someone else and really grow the company. So I would just first answer that with saying, when you do a transaction, you don't have to sell 100% to start. But we've had clients that, get obviously really involved in their trade association afterwards, kind of mentoring younger entrepreneurs in that space and kind of guide them through all the things they've gone through. We've had people start to angel invest, start to do back more smaller entrepreneurs, smaller companies, and sit on boards. We have, just a plethora of former clients. We've done 228 transactions in our 38 years. And, have a ton of clients that have gone, the nonprofit route, still stay involved on the board level. There's lots of different options, but there always is something, right? Because you go from operating a company or being CEO, to not at some point. And, you need to find purpose. You need to find kind of what that next hill is you're going to climb.
Yeah, and I think one of the stories we've touched a bit, briefly on is you're a business owner and you're worried about your line of credit and the cash flow and your whole entire team, and it's everybody. It's not just your house and whether you're paying your own mortgage; it's everybody's mortgage that you're paying, and that's a burden. And you're working 60 hours a week, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, I'm going to sell the company and I'm going to go off and play golf. It's like, well, do you realize how many rounds of golf that is every week?
Yeah.
I hope you love it, and or you better come with something else. And,
Yep.
One of the greatest legacies ever is Jiminy Christmas right down the street at UCLA, and you sit there and you go, okay, man, help me out, Shane. Basketball.
John Wooden.
John Wooden, thank you. Yeah.
Yep.
John Wooden. He retired in the mid 70s, yet he lived at 99 years old, and here he is. That's a legacy. He was building young men. Period.
Yep.
That's what he did. It happened to be that he did it through basketball, and he was phenomenal. But when he retired, he lived on because he was still building young people, period. And that was his purpose. So I think it's important for everybody out there to realize that there needs to be something else. And you need to realize how many hours you're putting in and what you're doing. So, the passion and the purpose, because when you have more time and talent and treasure than you ever had, you need to figure out what to do with it.
Yeah. Well, just on a personal note, this industry and my role, it's kind of famous for long hours and, that sort of thing, very high stress, working these transactions. I think we have a pretty different culture in our firm, but just on the basketball thing you mentioned, I was a basketball coach for 6 years, which Graham, I think and we've connected over basketball for a long time. And I loved the ability to have something completely different from work. The students that, these are high school students. I was a JV coach, had no idea what I did for work. I didn't care, if a $100 million transaction went through that day or not. We were going to work on basketball. And I just think having that kind of balance a little bit helped me keep things into perspective. And, I loved it. And I'll always kind of be around the game and stuff like that, because it really helps you kind of put things in perspective a lot.
Right. Especially coaching young kids, they're, like you say, you could be, have a transaction go through or not go through, which could change lives.
Yeah.
And they're working on a left-handed layup.
It's always a left-handed layup.
So that's good. And then it comes down to relationships, and that's kind of another thing we're going to touch base on is, you have a relationship with these kids, you have a relationship with the business owners. What kind of relationships do you see ongoing between the buyer, the seller, you and your organization and those people? What does that look like?
Yeah, the nature of our work specifically is very transactional. We handle transactions, but I think it takes about 6 to 9 months to sell a company, somewhere in that. In those 6 to 9 months, you become really close with your clients. It's an emotional journey. It's not just a spreadsheet. It's what's going on with their kids, what's going on with their parents, what's going on with their marriage. All these things are factors in this process. And so you become really close with people. And, even though the wire's clear one day and the documents are signed, you still are friends and you're still close with these people. So our firm does an offsite in Montana every year, and we take our former clients and prospects and future clients. And we really just want, them to meet and commingle, because, they're all pretty high powered CEOs and, or former CEOs. And I love it because you get to kind of reconnect with people, and, kind of reminisce a little bit on the journey you're on, because at the end of the day, this is a relationship business. It's about working with someone you can trust. And it's really, I think, what kind of separates us and what we try to separate ourselves, because we end up, and it's a rarity, we have pretty really good relationships with our former clients.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I think that, like you say, it's transactional. And if you can build that relationship, build that trust over a period of time, then,
and just from a business development perspective, most of our deal flow of future transactions come from those former clients. As you know, CEOs hang out with other CEOs or family-owned businesses. They kind of rely on each other and trust each other because they're getting bombarded by people like us all day to, sell them services. So they really rely on each other. So our best referral source is actually our former clients. And, that just, I think, doubles down on the importance of that relationship with them and saying, hey, yeah, I trust these guys. They did a good job. I know they'll take care of you as well.
Yeah, well, and hanging out in Montana doesn't sound bad either.
Yeah, the fly fishing and golf is also fun.
So you said the process is 6 to 9 months. What are some of the challenges you're seeing right now, or just in general? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's it can be. We've worked on transactions that are taken 24 months, and those are ones where we'll try to come in early and do some prep work, which I know, Graham, is some stuff you do as well, to start to think about things from a timing perspective. I'd say one of the biggest things that we look for when we're kind of meeting with a company is, do they have a succession plan? What happens if the CEO or the owner or the president, whatever title you want to give them, has all the relationships? If they have a rake org chart, like we call it sometimes, where it's just them and everyone else at the bottom, that's probably not a business that someone can come in and purchase, because if you give that person at the top a big check, they're going to question whether or not that person's going to stay motivated to continue to run the company. So, we get involved quite a bit in layering in management, making sure there's a succession plan in place, whether that's pre-transaction or post-transaction. It's important to have those conversations. Another one would just be timing. I mean, overall timing. Trying to time an M&A transaction is difficult. You don't want to sell at the peak because, or go to market at the peak, because then there's eventually going to be a downside to it. You really want to time it as things are going up, and our job as storytellers to these potential bidders is to connect the dots and say, hey, this is where it's going. You can, if you purchase it here with some more capital or whatever your game plan is, you can get it to the next level. So timing a transaction from both an internal company and a, kind of global financial markets, interest rates, all those sorts of things is a really interesting challenge. And then, also your team, I think, is a really, how do you communicate this to your team? Are you the sole shareholder? Are there other, is there equity spread amongst the management team? We've had clients that really want to tell their team right away, their whole company right away. We've had clients that, don't want to tell anybody. And, our advice is typically you don't want to share until there's something that's going to happen at the very minimum, because people are going to ask questions you just don't have answers to. Like, am I going to have the same health plan? Am I still going to be working with so-and-so? Things you're not able to answer. So, from the team perspective, is there a group of, really solid managers that you trust that could actually be a benefit to this process that the buyer would eventually like to meet with? That's part of the succession plan. Just, how do you layer that in? And it's, it's different on every single company, which is, again, something I love about this work. It's never cookie cutter. It's never the same thing. Each company is a living organism and is different. So you try to go into it best informed by, previous experiences, but at the end of the day, it's all going to be new, and you really want to treat it as such.
Right. Well, and I think you said it really well. It's a living organism, and I think that many times the sellers get going into this transaction, they start it, and whether they inform their team or not is one thing, but then they stop doing what they do best. They stop hiring, they stop selling, they stop, and they almost put their business on pause while they're trying to do this transaction.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that needs to be done and said is, don't put your business on pause. This is additional work. This is a lot of effort and energy that you need to put in along with the emotion, but you still need to go out and hire the CFO. You still need to replace these people, even if unfortunately there may be changes in a year or two. And, I think that that's important, that they continue to grow.
Yeah. This will sound a little self-serving, but I'll say it, you should hire someone to advise you selling your company. If you do it yourself, you're eventually going to take your eye off the ball because you're going to be inundated with due diligence requests and questions, and you're not going to be able to run the company like you used to. And we say M&A is for mergers and acquisitions, but it's James Thompson, who's our managing partner here, says it's momentum and activity. Is the business continuing to grow, continuing on the path that it's supposed to? Because if it's not, then the deal's going to change, the transaction's going to change, and buyers love one-off. They call them proprietary deals because they get to tie up a company, they get to deal directly with the CEO, and they get to kind of tweak things and really get their hands in there and not have to run through a competitive process and not have to be kept at arm's length, which having an advisor does. So, but whether or not you contact us or hire somebody to manage the transaction, because it's gonna A, free you up to do what you do best, like you said, and B, result in seeing a bunch of different offers, not just one, and being able to make a correct decision on which path to go down.
Yeah, and I don't think that's self-serving at all. I think that's important advice, and I think it goes along with is not only do you hire someone like yourself to do the work, but you need to look at your own CPA, your own attorney, they may be wonderful and brilliant, but when was the last transaction they were part of? When did they do something along these lines where there's that experience? And you may have to go outside and kind of build those advisors and get different group of advisors for this specific transaction.
For sure. Yeah. The guy or gal who did your lease is, is probably not going to be the person who's ready to, do an M&A transaction. It's a different world. And, I think most attorneys would admit that. That's one of the first things that we do when we get involved is bring in really strong M&A counsel to represent these companies, because the buyers are going to have really strong, high-powered attorneys. And honestly, the people that do deals on a consistent basis are going to be able to know what market is and actually make things go quicker.
Right.
It's not going to be something that gets dragged out while someone's trying to play catch up. And again, same with your wealth manager, same with your CPA. It's the transaction world it's a different beast than just your kind of standard straight over tackle, what a business does on a day in and day out basis.
Yeah, that's actually reminds me of one where they it was a small transaction, and basically somebody's going to write a check for it situation, and called the attorney and said, "Hey, can you write up the contract for me?" And it was, I don't know, 150 pages long. I was like, there was the most complicated clawback situation I'd ever seen. And so all of a sudden, this person thought they would potentially sell a business, and then, in the end, may have pay someone to actually, buy their business from them. The way the clawbacks worked, it was like, it's a one pager. We just need a one page situation, and so that just showed the lack of understanding. The person probably went to Rocket, or something, some online forum and said, what do I need to, purchase a building or list, sell a building or business
Yep.
rather. And they printed it out and filled in the blanks. So no,
Yep.
it's not necessarily cheaper. In that case, it was far from cheaper. So, and relationships, back to that also, talk about the customers and those relationships as well. And I think it's not just the employees, it's external relationships.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, if you're selling to a competitor, if you're selling to someone else in an adjacent industry, it affects your customers as well. And it's really important, who holds those relationships with those customers. Is that, are those your salespeople, or do you hold all of those really close to the chest? Because it's going to be really difficult for someone to purchase a company if you hold all those relationships. And if there's this thing that's now being pretty common on M&A transactions, and it's called customer due diligence. And they hire firms to actually call your customers on a kind of, think of it as they position themselves as a
shopper.
Yeah, exactly. As a customer satisfaction, hey, how do you like working with these guys? Are they doing a good job? And that's, that is sometimes actually a company that is on the market and is actually being transacted. And it's because those relationships with customers matter so much. And this is typically obviously a B2B situation.
Right.
They're not calling on consumers, but it's really important to, have those relationships and to make sure that, and you want to do kind of warm leads, usually of saying like, hey, just so you know, we've hired a company that's going to be doing some client or some customer satisfaction surveys, expect a call from so-and-so. And, that can really enhance the value of a business. Cause when we're presenting financials and customer information, which is usually on a blind basis, we're not always giving away customer information to potential parties until the very end. It's really important to know kind of the backstory behind them and how long have you had those relationships? Is it contractual? Is it back of the napkin? Things like that is really important to understand prior to a transaction, and know how they're going to react once this becomes public, because it eventually will become public whether or not you say something or not.
Right. And if it's a back of the napkin or it's an annual contract, tell what's better. What looks better for the acquirer.
Contracted for sure. It definitely, I'll probably say this a few times, but it reduces risk, and anytime risk is lowered, valuation goes up. That's just kind of the nature of the financial model. So, anything that's contracted, we just closed a transaction here locally that the largest customer, there was some customer concentration, and we actually had to go get an exclusive agreement with that customer prior to closing the transaction. That was a stipulation made by the buyer. And, it's a sensitive subject to say, hey, I've got to go talk to my best customer. It ended up, handling really well, but it can be a sensitive topic at times.
And the fear is, first of all, if you craft it, I think then it can be done successfully.
Yes.
And the fear is probably in our own head, because we think we're the only one that can do anything for that customer. So yeah, it's, well, if I go call them, they're instantly going to leave, or, and the reality is, if you really have a strong relationship, you craft the message appropriately, they all understand that sooner or later, someone may retire. Yep. You're not going to go.
Most of the time, the reaction is, I was wondering when this was going to happen, right? Like you're getting a little old. Yeah.
Oh, what was it you said earlier? What was something? Oh, I know what it was that, and it would go into the next thing as far as, topic, but you said, you make sure you sell your business before you turn 70, or you're going to die with your boots on. And explain that a little, a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know if that should be a hard and fast rule. We've had clients over 70 that might watch this and call me afterwards. But it eventually just, you're so ingrained in this is who you are and what you do. And, if you haven't really found a succession plan and a way to transition the business by the time you're, whatever, it's probably more stage of life than actual age.
Sure.
Then, you're probably going to keep doing it. You've maybe passed the opportunity to transition things because you're probably holding on to things maybe a little too tight. And, we see that all the time. And, whether that's because junior, isn't up for the task, or, this one group keeps calling me, but I never sell to them because I've been competing against them for 30 years, whatever it is, whatever the reason is, we have these conversations all the time. And, when you really try to open the doors up to people and just say like, hey, there's so many other options here than just saying, all right, I'm out of the company the day after I sell. There's board seats. There's, can you be chairman? Can you transition over a 2-year period? There's all these ways of crafting it. And, I guess I would sum some of this up and saying there's a ton of preconceived fears that are in it, that are around selling a company. One of those is that someone's going to come in and fire all my employees. They're going to immediately cut everybody. Well, there's the opposite fear. The buyer is afraid that everyone's going to quit as soon as they buy. So those two can cancel each other out, because that's a fear on both sides. And obviously no one's going to buy a company without the human capital side of it. And there's the other thing of, what am I going to do afterwards? Graham, I think that's really something that you have really tough conversations with people about is, what does day one afterwards look like? And, so do we. And, these are people's legacies. It's something they built. It's, one of their children. It's not their only child. And, it's a very emotional process, right. Which for me, it doubles down on the importance of relationship. I'm a numbers guy at heart, but I love the relational side of this business, and I love being able to marry the two.
You must get that from your mom, is the emotional side.
You've met my dad before. He's maybe more the number side.
And so if these people are coming to you and they say, I want to sell in 5 years, do you say, I'll call you in 4? What's the process?
Yeah, it's a great question. We would probably say that's great. If someone says that, more than likely it's less than 5 years, because it's a little bit of an avalanche effect, right? Or snowball effect. It's, kind of once it gets going, it really starts to go. But there's a ton you can do ahead of time, looking at whether or not, like I said, your team, your people, is there ways you can get some equity down to your team so that they're incentivized to grow the company over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, to participate in this transaction. There's lots of things you can do ahead of time. We've got a client we've been working with for over 4 years now, and actually they've asked me and one of my partners to join their board. So we actually sit on the board of this company and meet monthly, and we're tracking towards a really large exit down the road. But we're on the ride with them. We're helping them recruit people. We're giving them introductions into different verticals just based on our business connections and the people we know. So there's lots of different ways you can do this process.
I remember, and I can't think of one that actually hasn't been true, but I remember working with some CPAs back when I was banking, and the standard was always, I never wish I sold later in life.
For sure. Yeah.
Everybody wishes they sold sooner.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's an exception to that. There's an exception to everything, but by and large, or like you say, you get that ball moving and you go, oh, in 5 years, I'm going to be 60, I'll retire. And then all of a sudden you're at 56 going, yeah, hey, that was a pretty good idea. I'm going to do it tomorrow.
Yep. And
So,
and the sooner you can get your kind of transaction team around you, you think
right.
about your CPA, you think about your wealth advisor, your coaches, your investment banker, uh, the better the process is going to go. There's a ton of tax planning you can do that your CPA and wealth manager can help with. There's gifting of shares of stock for kind of maybe that's future charitable things you want to do, or maybe that's being able to pass equity down to the next generation as part of the transaction. There's a ton of things you can do ahead of time. In the state of Washington, we have clients that are establishing residencies in different states because of the capital gains tax. Now that's, obviously a specific type of company where its leader can live in a different state. But there's lots of things you can do to maximize your eventual transaction.
Yeah, I find it interesting talking to different CPAs and wealth advisors at some of the strategies that are out there. It'd be fun to get somebody on just talking about that without them getting in trouble, of course. But uh, but it's truly amazing. It's not just moving to Florida or Arizona or something or Texas. There's way more complex transactional situations you put yourself in.
Which is, mostly due to the lack of detail in the actual law around, they kind of just haphazardly, I feel like, threw this together. So, it's on the ballot again to see if it gets repealed, the capital gains tax. It's not very many people know that there hasn't been a lot of money raised to get that word out there. But obviously most of our clients pay pretty close attention to that capital gains tax. As most are going to be paying capital gains if the transaction's set up in it correctly.
Right.
And you obviously want to make sure, and that's another, thing, the buyers are going to usually want an asset sale for the most part, because they get a step up in the basis, but the seller usually wants to have a stock deal to have it tax as capital gains. There's a lot of work you can do to make sure the company's in the correct form going into a transaction, to make sure from a tax perspective it's maximized.
Right. No, I think that's important for everybody to hear, is that there's definitely options, and options on what you want to do with the monies, options on whether you want to stay or go. What else what else what have we missed so far? What have we not covered?
Yeah. I think it's just kind of maybe from a more macro perspective, kind of what's going on in the M&A market. There's a ton of dry powder that's been raised by private equity, and dry powder, just cash, has been raised by private equity out of pension funds, out of insurance companies, to buy family and owned companies. There's a silver tsunami that we've been talking about for 10 years in this industry, which is, the boomers retiring, and, everyone's heard about that. Someone told me there's 7 million private companies with owners over 55 in the US. Now, some of those are sole proprietorships, they're probably not all M&A opportunities, but that's what this money's been raised for, to go after. We think the M&A market is going to be incredibly robust over the next 5 to 10 years. And, there's some pent up demand here as interest rates come down. We think that there's, just from our activity, we're busier right now than in the 9 years I've been here. And that's even through the pandemic, which, had the most M&A activity in history. So we're really bullish on what's coming next. And, the market's ready for it. Both, there's a lot of cash sitting on large strategics' balance sheets for acquisition purposes, and the private equity companies are ready as well, and are teed up to really start, I think, a strong wave of M&A.
And are you finding any verticals that, well, one, do you work in all the verticals, or
Yep.
are you exclusive? And then are there any that are more popular than others?
Yeah, we're a generalist firm.
Hmm.
One thing that's kind of unique about us is all of our senior partners are former CEOs. So they've built and sold a company themselves. So they've kind of walked the walk. So they all have, pretty specific industry expertise based on what company they ran.
Hmm.
But we have enough coverage over that to really just be generalists. And we think of the lower middle market, which is sub 250 million of transaction value, that a generalist is, you don't need to have someone who just does chemical deals or someone who just does uh, wood product manufacturing transactions, because ultimately, I think that there becomes a conflict of interest where you're selling to the same 10, 15, 20 buyers. And, their statement is, well, I know all the buyers. Well, yeah, but I'm only going to do this once. So is your allegiance to those 10 to 15, or is it to me? That's a conversation. That's just kind of, I guess, how we position ourselves, is that, based on where we get our referrals from, being from our former clients, that, we're solely focused on serving them, and, have a generalist mindset, in order to best serve, our clients. Because at the end of the day, knowing the buyers is table stakes. We all subscribe to the same databases. Uh, that's not necessarily industry expertise. It's really about handling and running the M&A process correctly and with integrity.
I agree. I think that, well, it's a sale. It's a business sale. It's a transaction. You have access to all the buyers, and as long as you have access to the same buyers, and surprisingly, if you have somebody in the tech world and you only work in the tech world, then that's great. But what happens when Home Depot goes, you know what, we want to add tech to our world, and there's a retail,
Yep. Yep.
and you don't know that. And
Yep.
so I think you're almost fighting, with the one hand, and instead of, really going after everything. So it's a little short-sighted for the seller, I think. And I agree with you 100%.
I know you're a big reader. There's a book called Range by Dave Epstein, or Dave Epstein. Have you heard of that book?
No, I'll have to check it out.
It's called that's subtitle is Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. And it's all about kind of debunking a little bit of the 10,000 hour, mastery, in the fact that having someone that can look at things through a bunch of different lenses, through a bunch of different experiences, talks about athletes, if they specialize at 5 years old, like a lot of these coaches want them to, they end up having a much lower ceiling than someone who played all the sports and, works on all their muscles and, all those sorts of things, end up having much higher ceilings and end up, being more of the pro athletes we see today. And also equates it in the business world. Someone that has lots of different experiences can really end up, being a good advisor, because they can look at things maybe through a lens that you haven't looked through, having your head down, running a business in one industry for 10, 15, 20, 50 years.
Yeah, I agree. Our mastermind, we find that with the people in it, that, we have somebody, excuse me, who's an electrical contractor with 5,000 employees, and we have a doctor with 25. Who would think that, they would have that much in common? And yet when it comes down to an HR issue, it's the same issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, there certainly is something to be said with the revenues and having understanding of, I want a private plane versus not, or whatever that case. But so many times, like you say, that generalist has an ability to, use that information and knowledge and, share it with the others. And so it's important to do that. So.
And then, you also asked just on kind of industries that have, maybe been more popular as of late. residential services and commercial services, obviously something you know very well, Graham, is incredibly attractive right now. We just sold our third home restoration business, so like water, fire damage. That's a really, we've sold HVAC businesses, we've sold plumbing businesses. Just the dynamics of that and kind of the specialty trade as you think about services that require a trade. There's, AI is never going to debunk someone coming in and, replacing your toilet, right?
Right.
There's anything with that sort of kind of mindset, advanced manufacturing, stuff like that is really attractive right now. We have quite a bit of manufacturing clients, and then distribution, kind of specialty value add distribution as well, are very popular areas.
Yeah, the distribution's hot right now. I've seen that firsthand. It's pretty amazing how that whole entire industry seemed like no one even knew what logistics meant, prior to COVID. And now it's a hot commodity.
And and all the investment that's going into automation and stuff like that. The people that are on the forefront of that are doing really well. We have a couple clients in that space, and they're gonna be very attractive assets when we take them to market.
Yeah. So when you say that, are they, taking and automating the warehouse and picking that type?
Yeah. So the robotics, the conveyor belt systems.
Yeah.
We sold a company locally in Seattle called RH Brown. We sold it to Bastion, which is a Toyota company. And Toyota also owns Raymond, which is the lift truck company. So Toyota has a whole US warehouse division, and that they're very long in and very excited about. And that's all about, the RH Brown company does a lot of the agriculture in Eastern Washington. So all those scanners for apples that can, grade apples in a millisecond, all that sort of stuff is just changing the whole distribution and the whole, food chain, really. And, as you think about 3PLs and all those sorts of things, it's really fascinating. And I'm learning a lot in it, and I'm fascinated by it all.
Yeah, me too. I have some friends and colleagues in the 3PL, 4PL world, and it is unbelievable. 20 years ago when they started, everybody thought they were crazy and that was just a waste of time. And they're laughing.
Yeah. Well, I guess one thing in summation I've learned in this role is the obscure ways in which fortunes have been made. You're kind of like kicking yourself, like, why didn't I think of that? Someone built a $30-40 million company on something that, may seem so obvious, but, they took a chance and they did it themselves. And, honestly, it's inspiring. The people I work with they inspire me. It's pretty cool. That's what people have built.
It is. I think that I agree with you. It's fun when they're diverse, they're different. You can work with, like you said, a 3PL and you're in the logistics world, and then you turn around and you're in the manufacturing, or you're in, was it marine floats? Well, that's a personal favorite of mine. I love that industry. Spent some time. Awesome
company, great people.
Yeah. And that's what makes it fun. And that is kind of what makes it fun to work with all these entrepreneurs, the crazy driven entrepreneur. And so I appreciate you being here today. It's been fun, and we should do that again. We'll maybe come up with any questions that our people have, and come back and answer some of those, and maybe they'll be more specific, deal oriented, or the top 10 reasons why you should sell tomorrow. I don't know what it'll be, but it'd be fun if you're up
if someone tells you that, probably they have a little self-serving involved in it, but
yeah. Oh, wait, how do people get a hold of you? Alexander Hutton, .com.
Yep. Yeah. My email is sjansen, JANSEN @alexanderhutton.com. Or you can,
I'll put it in the link too. So.
Yeah. Feel free to give my cell phone out as well for whatever.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll we'll have that in the show notes and the link so that people can get a hold of you, and if they have specific questions or they have a deal. And I also want people to know that, just because you reside in the Northwest and you focus the Northwest, that doesn't mean you only work in the Northwest. You have offices around the U.S. So
yeah, we have clients in Kentucky, we have clients in Chicago, Atlanta, all over the place. So, it's really more, happy to jump on an airplane at any time.